Today I'd like to talk about the Tuatha Danann, or the Tuatha Danann as they're sometimes called in English. These were the Irish gods and goddesses, but there's a lot of confusion about them as to who exactly they were. Lots of theories, and some of them quite far out. Although some of them might be more believable than they might seem at first. And there's a lot of crap you hear about them online from people who haven't actually read the material right and have preconceived ideas of what they want them to be, and so they've filled in the blanks with crap which they've made up. There have also been attempts in Celtic pagan circles, among modern druidists and whatnot, to reconstruct a myth which isn't actually there, and they've added a lot of stuff which has become canonical to newbies who are just reading Irish mythology for the first time. And so, while proselytizing and hypothesizing about what that, say for example, the creation myths of Celtic paganism were, is valuable, sure, from say an academic point of view or even an individual one, but it shouldn't be seen as canonical, and it shouldn't that information shouldn't be taken at face value like right away. You should look at the sources yourself and determine for yourself what you believe the functions were and the myths were, which weren't written down. About the name Tuatha Danann, this does not mean god tribes of Dana or Danu. There never was a goddess called Dana or Danu ever written down in Celtic mythology. There was a god called Dun, who has a Welsh counterpart, and this just means darkness, and he was said to be god of the underworld. Din is the underworld, and Dun, of course, is the ancestral, sort of like Hades. He's the collector of the dead souls in Celtic paganism. This is not related to Dana, however, or Danu, or any other word like that. There is also a goddess called Anna, who I mentioned in a previous video, but this has got nothing to do with Dana. Anu may be a form of this, because in medieval Irish there are more forms, more cases for nouns than there are in modern Irish. In modern Irish it's just genitive and nominative, but again, this is a completely different person. It's not to do with Dana. And people try to connect the Danube River, and sometimes the lost Israelite tribe, the tribe of Dan, but again, this is crap. It's unsubstantiated. What Danann actually means is they were the god tribes of skill, because Dawn in modern Irish, of course, there's an ancient equivalent of it, means skill. That's exactly what these gods were. If you look at Lugh Lawfather, for example, he's also called Lugh Ildánach, or Lugh Samildánach, Lugh the equally skilled in many arts. And if you look at Gwebnu, who is the first smith, and if you look at, for example, all the other gods have references to technology and stuff which wouldn't have existed before their arrival. It's for this reason why they're able to defeat the Firbolg, and it's for that reason they're able to become the gods of Ireland. According to the mythology, of course, there were about 5 or 6 different periods of occupation by different peoples in Ireland, and lots of people try to connect the arrival of the Tuatha Danann with the arrival of the Celts in Ireland. But this is, in my opinion, a very outdated theory, because it rests upon the idea that the Celts arrived in the Iron Age and displaced the native people themselves, and before the Celts arrived we were just a completely different people. But in reality the genetic record, as well as the cultural archaeological record, shows something completely different. It shows continuity, both in genetics and in culture, going way back to the Stone Age up to the modern day in Ireland. There never was a Celtic replacement, and again this replacement theory is built upon linguistic ideas, which again are outdated, because in the Indo-European languages spread in the Stone Age. They didn't spread it in the Iron Age. They weren't still spreading across Europe in the Iron Age, that is. And also, the Hallstatt culture was not the earliest Celtic culture. This is the site in Switzerland where a large amount of Celtic artifacts were found, dumped into a lake ritually. And so the house of culture, as opposed to the Latin culture, which was a later ritual lake site, have become the defining characters of the early Celtic and later Celtic period. But in light of recent discoveries in Portugal and Ireland and other places, it's more likely that the Celtic culture evolved trans-terraneously at the same time, so contemporaneously and trans-terraneously. Bits of culture from Ireland and the British Isles and Portugal and Spain and France mixed with Switzerland and Germany and other places, and over time this culture was created and spread across Europe. And it was carried by the same genetic stock of people. Of course, if you look at Celtic artifacts in the Ukraine or in Eastern Europe or in Greece and Turkey, you'll find that they depicted themselves in the same way that medieval Irish people did. There was certainly genetic similarities and in addition to the cultural similarities, which makes sense because culture is an expression of ethnicity. But the Tuatha de Danann did not represent some sort of Celtic people who replaced, say, the Firbolg, who were like a Bronze Age people. That's an outdated theory. What it was more akin to was, say, the battle between the gods and the giants, and before then we have, say, a war between the gods themselves. So in Norse mythology you get the Aesir and the Vanir, and in Celtic mythology again the Tuatha de Danann and the Firbolg. Again, it's the same story, and then of course the giants or the Fomorians in Irish mythology who came after. Because what you get before the war between the gods is you get a time of peace and perfection, and then of course you get more war. That's how it goes. So these god tribes of skill, many people try to make more connections with them and say the Iron Age, because of all the references to silver and iron when talking about the Tuatha de Danann. So they often are described as having iron ships, quite futuristic, and that's another point I'm going to get to in a moment. Or how Bress, before he comes to Ireland, is described as appearing as a silver vessel on the horizon, and that's when the goddess, I forget her name, he appears to her as that on the horizon. Also, the mountain where they set their ships on fire when they arrived was Slieve Éireann, which is it also still called Slieve Éireann in modern Irish. That's the Iron Mountain, which is in County Leitrim today. And that was when they drove the ships up on shore, set them on fire, and that's the mountain where they arrived at. True, there are also similar stories in the Basque country about these northern sort of gods who came down in ships of iron, and sure, there is more to be looked at in there, and of course I'm sure it does relate to the coming of technology, but it shouldn't be equated with the Celtic arrival, because there never was a real Celtic invasion in Ireland. Culture from the Latin period came over and influenced centuries later medieval artwork in Ireland, which is very clear. You can still see very similar designs from that Latin period, but most of the Celtic culture would have already been there, and they were the same genetic stock of people who were already living there. Yes, the next point was this theory of say Hyperboreans, Atlanteans, say aliens of some kind. Although aliens is it's not the right word to use. Of course, Ireland is not alone in its mythology with discussing creatures like this. But again, I see it all as just a metaphor. It's if you were to actually believe that there is a group of people who were replaced as the natives genetically, then you would have to equate this with real evidence which we have from genetic studies. Lots of people have tried to say that the Bellbeaker people that replaced the Western farmers, and the Western farmers themselves replaced the Western hunter-gatherers. But this is, Mesolithic, Neolithic, Bronze Age. But the thing is, those bell beaker peoples were made from the same genetic stock as the Western farmers themselves. And so saying that this Bronze Age replacement happened is, yeah, you're really going out on a limb there, because you're saying that the bell beaker people were somehow a different race or a different genetic stock to the Western farmers, when the genetic evidence we have shows that they actually came from relatively the same stock. The same thing if you look at Indo-Europeans. If you look at the Yamnaya culture in which is around Ukraine today, around Serbia, around the Baltic region, not the Baltic, the Balkans, you'll find that it was those people who had the first European Neolithic, who then spread east and went to India. And then, of course, if you look at the Indo-Europeans who came from the east, from that Baltic region, but the thing is, those Yamnaya people were the same stock as the Western Europeans, as the Northern Europeans, Central Europeans. They were also that same genetic stock. So by saying that there was like an Indo-European invasion, an Indo-European conquest, again, this is false. I think a lot of internet gurus, the likes of Survive the Jive and people like that, are too academic in their analysis of this. They put too much weight on the idea of conquest and replacement. See, in archaeology, that's what people want. It's an easy way of explaining the past and the transition of one period of history to another. Oh, these people lived here, they had this type of pottery, they had this type of culture, then they were replaced by a new people with a new type of pottery, new culture. And the slightest little genetic evidence they have, which comes from mostly the analysis of haplogroups, which is highly inaccurate. And I'll make another video on talking about haplogroups, phenotypes, and what they mean, and how to truly analyze them. But just take it for now that these results are highly inaccurate. The Tuatha, in my opinion, did not represent any replacement group in Ireland, but rather it represented the coming of the gods of a more sophisticated age. That transition from spirits to gods, which we see all across Europe, and which is still represented in its older form. If you look at magic, this is another topic for another day. But yes, the spirits, that element of those androgynous nature spirits, were still present in the mythology alongside the gods in later times. I'll also make another video talking about the development of anthropological societies and how this relates to the development of the complexity of their religions, and how this can actually help explain why religion can change over time. And this does not mean that different people came and replaced them. It's just the religion becomes more complex over time due to the advancement of society, but it's still the same religion as it was in the Stone Age. The rituals and the myths and the main ideas of the religion are still pretty much the same as they were in the Stone Age. So yeah, that's just a quick point about the Tuatha. Also, I'll make another video talking more detail about the Tuatha and just about each of the gods, the genealogy, who they were, what they represented, because it isn't a very well understood topic. But that's all I have to say for now.